the Great British Manufacturing Podcast, brought to you by MTD, MFG and Jefferson.
Hello and welcome to this week's Great British Manufacturing Podcast. On this week's show, we will review the latest positive news from British manufacturing sector and welcome a special guest. Phil Wild, Chief Executive Officer of James Cropper, the Advanced Materials and Paper Products Group. This week, we're delighted to welcome two new members to the Factory Now platform. New members this week include Coventry-based Manufacturing Technology Centre, home to some of the world's most advanced manufacturing equipment and award-winning apprenticeship scheme, and AIS Vanguard, one of the UK's premier engineering service providers, specialising in heavy technical lifting, logistics and installation. My name is Joe Reynolds, and joining me now is my co-host Stuart Whitehead. Stuart, another fantastic week in the world of UK manufacturing.
Absolutely. After Nissan's announcement last week, we thought it might be a bit of a come down this week, but far from it, Joe.
Yeah, let's jump straight in, shall we? The future of Vauxhall's Ellesmere port plant, it's looking secure, isn't it? 100 million investment.
Absolutely. So Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced it will invest £100 million to build electric vehicles at the Ellesmere port plant in Cheshire. The factory will build 4 electric vans and their passenger car equivalents for the parent company's brands Vauxhall, Opel, Peugeot and Citroën. The decision, which we believe is backed by a reported £30 million in government support, will secure the jobs of 1,000 workers at the plant, as well as an estimated 3,000 in the supply chain. Stellantis says that there will be further support to enable carbon neutrality for the plant by the middle of the decade. It aims to be 100% self-sufficient for electricity, and work will commence shortly on potential wind and solar farms in the area. It's also announced plans to consult on further investment with the creation of a new UK parts distribution centre nearby.
And the next story, it's one we've talked about at length for some months, probably years now, but Britishvolt, the new gigafactory in Northumberland, have got what they're calling the green light.
Absolutely. So Northumberland County Council has pre-planned by Britishvolt to build a new battery production facility at the site of the former Blythe power station, previously described as the largest industrial investment in the North East since Nissan's arrival in 1984. The firm has said the gigafactory could begin producing lithium-ion batteries by the end of 2023. The £2.6 billion plant is expected to create 3,000 direct jobs and a further 5,000 across the UK supply chain.
The company, SeAH, they've announced plans to build a £117 million factory on the Humber. Again, incredible news for the area.
It certainly is. And just some clarification on that. It has been originally heralded as a £173 million investment, but SeAH has now confirmed that the actual figure is more than double it. It's likely to be £260 million to be committed over the next 3 years. And that's only just been confirmed in the last few minutes. SeAH Wind, which is actually will be operating a facility as part of the South Korean industrial conglomerate SeAH Holdings. And this is going to be the biggest steel monopile production facility in the world when it opens. The monopiles, which are, if you're not accustomed to them or acquainted with them, they're essentially giant steel tubes that are driven into the seabed to support the construction of offshore wind turbines. These will be supplied from the site to operators in the UK and Europe, but the firm is also planning to target the American and Asian markets. Looking likely to open in 2023, the investment should create around about 750 direct jobs.
Yeah, these manufacturers are going to have to pull their finger out, aren't they, and start these recruitment drives, because there's a lot of jobs at the moment.
Absolutely. The skills shortage hasn't gone away. Yes, we've had the pandemic and so on and so forth, but the job market is incredibly healthy, and the salaries within manufacturing are creeping up as well. So you're absolutely right that they need to start planning and acting now, not waiting for the factory to open.
So we'll take a brief pause in this week's positive UK manufacturing news. There's plenty more to follow, but at this stage, I'd like to introduce this week's special guest, Phil Wild, who is the Chief Executive Officer at James Cropper. Phil, a very warm welcome to the podcast.
Hi, good morning, Joe. Good morning, Stuart.
We like to start a bit about you, really. Tell us about your career to date, your role and your responsibility at James Cropper.
Great, I'd be delighted to. I started off as an engineering apprentice quite a few years ago now, and started my career working for Lotus in both the UK and in France, and actually in diesel systems and how times change moving forward, which I'm sure we'll come on to. I then went on to do an engineering degree, and I worked for a company after I graduated, a 3M company, who were made famous for their Post-it notes, and I worked in industrial and in healthcare and in the security sector. And I started as an engineer. And interestingly, Joe, despite my very strong passion for manufacturing, I actually realised I wasn't a terribly good engineer. I found myself progressing more down the management route, and I was delighted to be able to run my own manufacturing sites and then multiple sites, and eventually was a director of a number of businesses within 3M. I then left in 2012, having spent over 20 years with 3M, and I joined James Cropper in 2012.
Fascinating, and it's you're doing a jolly good job for what it's worth. But can we get an overview of the company, an overview of James Cropper?
Yes, certainly. So just out of interest, it's a special year for us this year. So we're celebrating 275 years of the company being in existence this year. So James Cropper, today we're over 100 million sales. We've got over 600 employees in 4 different manufacturing locations in the UK and also in the US as well. And we're exporting now about 60% of the products that are produced. Now, interestingly, when I sort of described that, but the head office is we're in the Lake District, so we're a rural business, which also brings some unique characteristics and also values to our business as well. And we have 3 different businesses within the James Cropper Group: paper, colour form, and technical fibre. And paper is a bespoke paper mill, and that really goes back to the heritage. So that's the 275 years of history of the company. But today we're making bespoke papers for the likes of Burberry, Mulberry, Louis Vuitton, Apple. So high quality luxury brands. Our Colourform business manufactures sustainable alternatives to single-use plastics, and brands such as Moet Hennessy and a whole range of beauty products like Armani, Lancome, Dior, and so on. And our technical fibre business manufactures materials that go into sectors such as aerospace, like Boeing and like Airbus, but also more often into the hydrogen sector for both manufacturing of fuel cells, but also the manufacturing of hydrogen itself.
Fantastic summary, and great to hear about your personal journey as well, Phil. And happy anniversary. I'm not sure what you get to somebody who's 275 years old, but plenty of gold or platinum. So first question for me, this is from one of our listeners. Sustainability is very much a core commercial proposition for James Cropper. Why is this so important? What does it actually mean? And could you please give us some examples?
So I think your answer to is celebrating 275 years, by the way, is we get out of lockdown. That's our celebration.
Absolutely, yes.
I think for us, sustainability has been at the heart of what what the business has been founded on for decades. And so for example, the paper business is to some degree an alternative to plastics, and so whereas paper would be manufactured from a sustainable source, it's also biodegradable, compostable, recyclable as well. Our head office sits in a national heritage site, and also we're in a site of special scientific interest as well. So there's a lot of culture that really builds up to this, and I think what we've seen is over the years, environmental, and now I would sort of expand that to sort of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, has become far more fashionable, particularly within the manufacturing sector. But now that's also extended into the service sector as well. And whereas it has, and I absolutely endorse that, because I think it's the right thing to do. It sits with our ethics and the values of what we stand for. I would also add, and what I mean by that is what we're also seeing is others sort of jumping on the coattails of environmental ESG sustainability We see a lot of greenwashing that's happening, whether it's a company, for example, that they've invested in seaweed when actually it has nothing to do with their business. And I think where we've positioned this is it's actually embedded in the commercial proposition of the company. So rather than a separate initiative to tick the box of ESG or tick the box of sustainability or environmental, we've positioned this very much at the heart of our commercial strategy for what we do. And I would sort of coin a phrase, from waste to wealth. And what I mean by that is by using materials that perhaps otherwise would go to landfill. We're really actively looking at different materials and different processes that we can reuse. And what we've decided is that upcycling into much better products. And I've got a whole series of examples that we can share with you.
No, fantastic. And you referenced the ESG, the transition from sustainability to SG. Again, could you please describe this for our listeners and the associated benefits? And like you say, if you could, give us some examples, that would be fantastic to illustrate that.
So if you sort of separate that out a little bit, so ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and whereas through the years, we've had a business that's been built on sustainability. Really that's been covering the environmental aspect, and I talk about a number of examples in there. The social aspect for us is about a responsibility of the company and the responsibility of, to employees, to the community, to stakeholders. And again, a couple of examples on that. And good governance and being a PLC and as many of your listeners will be aware, particularly about being part of a FTSE company, governance is only going in one direction. And it's important to have that right level of governance in place. So thrhree quite different aspects. But let me give you a couple of examples, and this is where I would sort of describe the journey that we've been on is about being the real deal, as opposed to there's a set of sort of checklists that we need to do, and we've tinkered with this. This actually sits at the heart of what the company is about. So a couple of examples from you that I can provide. So let's use the one on coffee cups. And just anecdotally, by the way, are you aware that there's 500 billion single-use coffee cups are used each year, and the majority of those go straight to landfill? That's 10 billion a day, and even in the UK, we're using over 2.5 billion coffee cups a year, single-use coffee cups, and we looked at that, and we looked at this differently on a coffee cup when we actually saw it as a raw material. So rather than it move to landfill, we've developed a process that extracts the plastic from the inside of the coffee cup, and then that thing is then sold on to a third party and used for a whole series of different plastic applications where it's reused. But then we're extracting the fibers from the coffee cups and then reusing those in our manufacturing for both paper and also in colour form as well. Now we've coined the phrase cup cycling because we're taking the cup and we are upcycling it into different products. So the cups are coming from people like Costa and McDonald's, and there are all the sort of high street coffee shops that we'd all be aware of. And here I'm talking about used coffee cups, not virgin material. And we're taking that, we're processing it, and we're producing luxury papers out. So a couple of very, very practical examples. A Burberry shopping bag contains 4 used coffee cups. A Mulberry shopping bag and box also contains used coffee cups as well. The Selfridges bag. So there are an example after example of where beautiful luxury packaging and luxury papers are actually manufactured part from using waste material and upcycling it of where it would have gone through to landfill.
Yeah, that's fascinating for me. Is it all about sustainability, or let's be frank? Can you make product? Presumably, it's not cheaper to upcycle cups into bags. Presumably, it would be cheaper to make it from virgin material.
Do you know what? It's an excellent question, and let sort of the economics do the talking on this, because in order to do this, clearly you need to invest in a process. You need to drive innovation about thinking differently. However, waste materials are typically cheaper, but materials that go into landfill are going to be cheaper than virgin materials coming through. So we can also leverage value from coming out. And this is why I sort of coined this phrase of from waste to wealth. We're taking waste materials and we're generating wealth to come out from that. So it is in fact the opposite. So, taking apart from the upfront investment to do this, actually we're providing materials that are a lower cost to the company, and therefore we're taking it out of landfill and we're providing value from that material. So that's where it becomes a commercial proposition to be able to move in this direction.
Well, that's win-win, isn't it? You can't lose, really. It must be an absolute. I just can't imagine a supply chain. Do you have to go and pick them up from each individual McDonald's, or are they picked up from a central site, or how's that work?
So, in order for this to work, you need to set up a value chain, and so we work with partners like Veolia and so on, who would work within the shops, but also work on the high street as well. And we've created a value chain that we will pay a premium for a coffee cup compared to the value that people like Veolia would get elsewhere. And by doing that, we're providing an incentive for them to filter it out. And they would come in bundles of $250,000 a time, compress and arrive to our site. All local, by the way, so all from the UK. So it's not sort of going through some long supply chain to get to us. And then we would process it from there. We can cope with a reasonable amount of waste, but most of the waste is filtered out before it comes to us.
Fascinating.
No, absolutely, Joe. Just going to ask Phil, are your customers specifying a certain percentage of recycled material in their products? Is it being driven by them or you, or very much a partnership?
Do you know, that's such a great question. If I rewind back the clock a few years ago now, to some degree, this was a little bit of an innovation and actually almost a secret in the market, that we had a process that could do this. And when we started to engage customers on, actually, we've got a really interesting environmental proposition here. It didn't resound that well. I'm probably going back just about 5 years ago now. And what we've seen over those years is an increased interest and value around the sustainability proposition. That now we've got customers coming to us and saying, actually, can you provide material that is coming from waste sources? So it's a real turnaround, and I think it's particularly moving forward. It's not going to be good enough just to provide environmental credentials. You're going to have to go above and beyond and do some things that are different and differentiate yourself. And this is kind of a good example of doing that. But certainly, we've seen customer behaviors and also end customer behaviors of people, selecting product from retail and actually checking the credentials of those products now on whether it's social or sustainability, in order to drive their buying habits.
That's fascinating. Do you have any more examples?
So we developed a new business just a couple of years ago called Colourform, and Colourform is an alternative to single-use plastics. And just for interest, by the way, there's 380 million tons of vacuum-formed plastic that are produced every year. And that's equivalent to over 1,000 Empire State Buildings, and most of which are either not recyclable because they're a part of mixed waste and go to landfill. So we developed a process using essentially paper to be able to produce an alternative to single-use plastic. So it's a 3D formed shape from cellulose. So again, it either comes from virgin fiber, or we can use waste fiber. It's compostable, biodegradable, and recyclable. And that's a business that, for us is what we would describe as a new business, particularly given our age. but been going just 2 or 3 years now. And now we're providing materials that go into people like Diesel, L'Oreal, Armani. We've just launched a packaging for Ruinart Champagne with Moet Hennessy, and all of which, a result, have been removing single-use plastics that were previously existing in their packaging with colour form, which has provided, if you like, the perfect alternative to single-use plastics, but gives that sustainability credential. To give you one other example, we've got a lot of manufacturing operations through the UK and also in the US as well. Our head office in the Lake District has got plenty of factories and plenty of warehouse, and we've utilised those roofs to put arrays of solar panels. And today we're generating over 1 gigawatt of energy. So that's enough energy to run 1,000 homes for a year. Driven from the solar panels. Now, the unique piece of this is it's actually a crowdfunding opportunity that we've driven, and it's been crowdfunded by the community. So actually, the community owns the solar panels. We've committed to use our roofs to put them on, and we've also guaranteed that we will also take every bit of energy that comes off and drive that as green energy to power some of our manufacturing process. But all of the profits go back into the community. And that's quite a good example of both environmental and social when we come back to ESG.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and many more companies should follow. But it's fair to say this isn't going away, is it? ESG, it's not a fad. This is only going to become more and more important as time moves on.
Well, like I say, I mean, and I think as the understanding and the governance really starts to appear on ESG, it's going to come under greater scrutiny, and actually, it's going to become a benchmark or almost a ticket in order to be able to manufacture. It won't be good enough to not to be on the agenda of driving this forward, and and I think it'll also drive, and as it has done for us, the agenda of how you grow your business. So for example, in our technical fibre business, which traditionally was focused on aerospace, Boeing and Airbus and so on, but also in the defence markets as well. And by really understanding the ESG agenda, we over the last few years have focused our attention on moving away from fossil fuel markets to green energy markets, and we've been driving an agenda in hydrogen. And whereas a few years ago, hydrogen was pretty much none of our business, now it actually represents over 30% of our technical fibre business, of manufacturing now over 50% of the materials that go into fuel cells. And also recently we acquired a business that manufactures electrodes to produce green hydrogen as well. So it's not just about adapting the business that in the process you've got today, but it's also driving a commercial strategy moving forward as well.
Where do you think other manufacturers can follow you? Clearly, not everyone's going to be making the same products as you, but I find it astonishing. Most manufacturers, well over 90%, don't even have ISO 14001. The very basics of recycling, essentially. What can manufacturers do to get on this journey?
I think there's a great opportunity to share best practice, and the best practice is less about the application, because the applications will be unique depending on who the manufacturers are, but more about the process that you've gone through. Really understanding why would you do this, and if we see this as a burden and something that we need to tick the box on, frankly, it's not going to work, and it needs to be seen as a commercial proposition that's embedded within the company that really helps to drive a growth agenda moving forward. I mean, who wouldn't want to reduce their energy bill? Who wouldn't want to reduce their landfill? Because even from, despite it's got very strong ethical grounds and environmental grounds, but actually it's going to significantly benefit the P&L as well. So it is a win-win, but it's about an attitude towards the agenda.
And the final one for me, James Cropper, like you say, 275 years young. What's the future hold for the company?
So we've over the years we've been focused on driving innovation and driving change. So we're going to see that moving forward, but we're going to see that on another level. And I would anticipate that our global platform will extend as well. Actually, just in the next few months, we launching a range of paper which has got antiviral properties. We're also launching a new range for plastic-free packaging in Champagne, and excitingly, we're working on electrodes for hydrogen, which the business that we've acquired recently. But to do that even more efficiently, and also with a greater life cycle as well. So building on what we've got, but some exciting things around the corner as well.
Well, Phil, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week. And yeah, thanks a lot, and we'll catch up soon.
I'm delighted. Thank you.
Stu, what a fascinating interview.
Absolutely. Learned a lot over the last 20 minutes listening to Phil. And any company that can survive in the market for 275 years, they need to be listened to.
Yeah, they're doing something right, aren't they? And if you'd like to appear on the podcast, please do let us know by sending us an email to podcast@mtdmfg.com. We would love to have you on. And also, please don't forget to download the MTD MFG app for exclusive content. It's available on both Android and iPhone at the usual stores. Stuart, the next story, one of my favourite of the week, features Lotus, and they've unveiled the new Emira sports car. What a beautiful sports car.
It really is. And unfortunately, this is a podcast, so you can't see the imagery. But so this is Lotus's first brand new series production model in more than a decade. And it's a stunning mid-engine two-seat sports car, priced at around £60,000. It will go on sale to all the key global markets next spring, and is the last internal combustion engine powered car that the Lotus will build before the British market fully embraces electrification. The Emira will be built at a new factory at Lotus's site in Vauxhall, which is part of a £100 million investment in the manufacturer's UK facilities, which we've covered on a previous podcast.
Yeah, and just on that, I'm all for electric vehicles, sustainability and all the rest of it. But, Lotus is great. It is great to see one last hooray, isn't it? Hurrah, rather.
I know, absolutely. And people have commented. It was so well received on social media. We posted in different formats, a video again this morning as well. And but people are saying the same thing. Yeah, they realise the journey we're on towards electrification, but they are just going to miss the pure grunt of a petrol engine. And
at £60,000, don't get me wrong, I'm sure options and you can buy one more expensive, but it's. Don't get me wrong, it's not for everybody, but it's quite a low barrier to entry for a car, a car of that quality, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you see it, people have been compared to Ferrari and, and other supercars. And as you say, £60,000 price point, it seems, I won't say the word cheap because it's a huge amount of money, but it seems remarkably low for what a car appears to be.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll have to start making some money at this podcast, Stuart, and we can have one each. But,
yeah, please send money. We have to do a Bob Geldof bit now, Joe. Please send your money.
So next story, food manufacturer Bakkavor, they've launched a colossal recruitment drive.
Yeah, huge. Bakkavor, UK's leading manufacturer of fresh prepared food, has announced that it's recruiting for 1,500 food production jobs across its 23 UK factories. The company produces meals, salads, pizza and bread and desserts for the UK's major supermarkets, including Tesco, M&S, Sainsbury's and Waitrose, and already employs around about 17,000 people in the UK.
Brilliant. Next one, WEFL or Waffle. They've started production of the first Boxer armoured vehicle. This is something we covered some time ago, but it's good to see these stories actually when it comes live. Yeah, they're progressing.
The story is progressing quite rapidly now. So WEFL or WEFL, not sure. Please get in touch if you know the correct pronunciation. Has commenced production of the vehicles for the British Army. Its new multi-million-pound factory in Stockport. And this is the first time in a number of years that armoured vehicles have actually been manufactured in the UK. In addition to manufacturing the armoured hulls for the British Army's new vehicles, the company will be responsible for the assembly, integration and testing of a total of 225 Boxers. And this is part of the £2.3 billion contract signed between the MOD and Artec in November 2019. The contract supports more than 1,000 jobs across the UK, including 120 at the Stockport site.
Just another great week in the world of manufacturing, Stuart. Again, as always, there's so many stories we can't cover on a podcast, unfortunately, because we do try and keep it to this half an hour slot. But what a week! Fantastic.
It's unreal, and we've been doing this. I think this is episode 14 of the podcast. We haven't struggled for content in any week, which was a bit of a fear, wasn't it? At the beginning, it would be some kind of fallow weeks, and but hundreds and hundreds of £1 million are being invested in the sector. Thousands of jobs are being created. Companies from all over the world are setting up in the UK. Long may it continue.
Yeah, so that brings the end to this week's podcast. Stuart's off to speak to Lotus about a sponsored car. I'd like to thank Stuart himself, Phil Wilder, James Cropper. But as always, the biggest thank you goes to you at home for listening, and we'll catch you up next week.
To the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. You can find us on Twitter using @MTDMFG and @Jefferson_MFG.